Okay, anyway, as I started to say, a lot of these pictures were taken from the West Jersey chapter's files, specifically the Bob Long collection. There were a lot also that I took from other collections that the chapter had, a few from my personal collection, and a few from other fellows like Bob Farrell, uh, rest his soul. Bob Farrell was a great source, and he always came through with something if you ask him. So anyway, we're going to start out in Millville. Millville was a happening town. It was almost the PRSL or the West Jersey Railroad didn't have them. It was almost what you would call a division point. A lot of trains terminated there and originated there. So let's take a trip down the Maurice River branch first, where the economy was sustained by oysters and other seafood. And they'd have whole express cars, refrigerated cars of oysters. 6, 8, 10 cars at a time would be shipped out of there. And they'd catch the oysters in the morning, and people would be eating them in the evening in Philadelphia and New York. Do I have to tell you, Dave? Oh, there we go. Anyway, that's what we're going to do.
Let y'all take care. Let you read this for a minute or two.
Incidentally, if I make a mistake, I'm sorry. If I come up with something wrong, I'm sorry. You don't have to correct me.
Okay, well, here we go.
That's what Cape May, the whole county looks like from the air. And you can just about see where the railroad comes down.
Cape May Canal opening right here.
Yeah, Cape May Canal was built in 1941 as a shortcut for oil barges and whatnot to keep them from having to go out around the point there and keep them away from Nazi submarines. My uncle spent the entire war in one of those concrete towers down there with a pair of binoculars looking for submarines. By the way, this is Snapple, and this is usually a 1.5 to 2 Snapple program. You know you're in South Jersey when you see a sign like this. And the guy saw me taking a picture. The next day, he took muskrat off because you're not supposed to sell wild animals. And this is just a commercial for the, what do you call it? That's why I can't do this anymore. Anytime it's train time, go ahead, Dave, because there's another. Always expect a train anytime in any direction. Anyway, that's Operation Lifesaver. If I was doing this live, I'd be handing out Operation Lifesaver paraphernalia. Incidentally, the branch line to Bridgeton was built before the rest of the main line going down the center of the state, because the people in Bridgeton showed up at the railroad with the money, or part of the money. And you know, money talks. So they built the Bridgeton branch, which lasted until 1985. Which if you go over there today, you wouldn't know there was anything there. But at one time, all the shore towns were covered by 2 different railroads. It's hard to believe, but true. Not everybody liked the railroads initially. Of course, this poster was, I was going to say obviously, but maybe it's not. If you look at the locomotive as running over a wagon, this kind of thing was put together by the people that made wagons and buggy whips and that sort of thing. You have the same thing today. People don't want those rocket trains going through their town down through Gloucester County. One guy I had to write a letter to the editor. One guy had a picture of a Japanese bullet train on a poster protesting the expansion from Camden to Glassboro. And he had no clue what they were going to build down there, but he was against it anyway. Just a quick map showing the railroads in South Jersey. And as you can see, there's a lot of them. Of course, that's the only way they had to get out of the farm area and the seafood area. In the early days, you didn't have decent highways in South Jersey until the early 20s. It's just a little oops at Newfield. There's nothing to do with our territory, but I just kind of like the picture and I threw it in there. And every time there was a train wreck, half the town would show up because that was the best entertainment that week. Downtown Millville, it doesn't look that clean today. Wish they had saved that station. That was a beautiful building. Just below the station was Swift Tower. One I stole from Walter's shop. And look at the kerosene lantern on the end of the gate. That's how old that thing is. Plus the engine has slide valves. There's a proud crew getting ready to depart Millville for Cape May. Typical 5-man crew, which is why the railroads probably ran out of money. We're going to run down the Maurice River branch. Downtown Manu-Muskin. The only thing, you know, when you say Manu-Muskin, you think there's nothing there. But look at the 2 baggage carts. There was a lot happening in Manu-Muskin. Because it was the only probably way in and out. they had all these stations: Port Elizabeth, Morristown, Dorchester, Leesburg, Heislerville, and Morris River. They're all kind of Spartan, but they all have that big covered loading platform. There's another one with the covered loading platform.
And notice down in the corner, Ron's got milepost numbers listed.
Yeah, I tried to do that on most of them. This station still exists. It's down on Route 47, a couple of miles below that big Wawa there. And I don't know what the name of the town is. Port Elizabeth, no, further down. Anyway, it's been fixed up into a private residence, and it really looks nice, even though it's not the right colors. Notice the express cars used to ship out oysters. They were just stored there till they needed them down at the pier. They would have several trains a day with oysters and clams and crabs and fish. Initially, they put the fish in a barrel and ice it down. I don't think USDA would go for that today. It was Leesburg in 1949. It didn't change much. See, they all have that loading dock. And back in the mid-60s, go ahead, Dave. They had a fan trip. The Lehigh Valley chapter ran a fan trip down there. And this was the end of the track at the time. And that's the other end of the Leesburg station. And we came down in an RDC. And I'm telling you, I was about 15, 16 years old, and it was one hell of a ride. Menhaden. There's down the sand pits, and the box cars, they would just dump sand in the box cars, and they'd ship it out that way. Strange but true. I remember seeing a lot of box cars on the peanut line going out with sand in them. That was a little whoops. All right, we're going on down the line now. And I might say at this time, many of these photos were taken by the U.S. government or for the U.S. government for the assessment. If you see the date, March 1900, they went around and assessed all railroad stations and buildings and whatnot. And Bob Farrell went down to Washington to the place where they keep the photos and all, and spent 2 or 3 days down there copying these photographs. And this was just a really nifty photo, and all of these were, I guess they were 8x10s originally, and they were really nice photos. And it's got the cost of the station. One by a station, $1,300. I probably have that in my pocket. And I took it out with the knife. But that's a neat little station. Make a nice model. Bell plane, because if you've got a bell plane today, there's like 4 houses and a couple of cows. The other end of it. But notice how neat the track is. They took good care of their railroad. Down the line a little bit to Woodbine. Notice the buildings in the back. There's a 3-story building over there. There's a 2-story over there. Woodbine was a big manufacturing place. They had different companies, made leather goods. They made clothing. They made all sorts of things. And was a lot of Jewish people that settled the place. And sadly, they all moved out. And today, their building is a museum, Sam Aziz Museum, and it's something to see down there. It's really nicely taken care of by the city. There it is in the 60s, and you can see there's still a couple of buildings left, but not much. And there's looking at downtown Woodbine. You can see where it says the municipal building is here today on that corner, more or less. Mainline and siding. And Pikuleski's got the road all paved up nice down there. And they got brick crosswalks, and he's got sidewalk going all the way out into the woods. Because the mayor knows how to write a grant for the government. Mount Pleasant Tower. Mount Pleasant Tower was where the old Reading line, the Atlantic City Railroad, came down, and, or I guess I'm saying it backwards. This is where the West Jersey and Seashore Line came up to the Reading line. You can see, I'm pointing here and you can't see my finger, so what's the difference? Up in the middle right, you can see the bridge that's there today, where the Atlantic City Railroad ran over the West Jersey. And there was a connection there that they put in after the Pensy and the Reading cut a deal. And you could take a train from down through through the way they went to Atlantic City, and at Winslow they could go off on the Cape May branch, and they come down this way and wander on down. Because the West Jersey Railroad had not a very straight route. Where the Redding's Atlantic City Railroad had a pretty straight shot on down. It must have been warmer weather, because there's a guy up there either going to commit suicide or looks like he's ready to jump out the window up there in the tower. We have another view of the tower. Go ahead, Dave. There it is. And this is neat because, see, the guy's on one of those velocipedes. Sears and Roebuck sold them for $19.95 plus shipping and handling. And many of the railroad workers, that's how they got to work. You better know the schedule. But it was easy enough to take that thing off the track, I guess. But that was, if you go down Mount Pleasant Road, which you can pick up in Tuckahoe and take it to the end, that's where this tower was, where this, you can see well on this picture where the bridge is, and you can see the connecting track going off to the right. And if you go down to a business called Modern Gas, you can dig around in their front yard and still find some ties from the connecting track. Because it was still working into the early 1970s. There were a few businesses down here in Woodbine, and they'd come down and switch back. They'd come off the bridge down and switch back. And there was a lumber yard down at Seaville, and there was a place that took cattle. And I don't know if they slayed them or if they sold them or how it worked. I didn't ask. But my buddy, who was a conductor, told me one time he did a dumb thing. He was patting a cow on the nose through the slats in the stock car. And then he had to throw a switch, so he got off and put the gloves in his mouth. So I guess he had a good taste of cow snot. And that's from the other direction, looking towards where Mount Pleasant Tower would be. These photos aren't that sharp, but Mount Pleasant Tower would have been 3/4 of a mile down on the left. This is it's not a good picture, but I don't know who took it. And it was a recreation. Of course, the two Bud cars are on the bridge there, and the 37 is to the right. And some guy shows up in this old Chrysler, and he has one of those old Coca-Cola ice boxes from the 50s. And we took a lot of pictures. That was a CMSL trip. I don't even know if the sponsor was a chapter or not. Go ahead to the other one. Supposedly this was the last operating steam engine in South Jersey, and that's an arguable point. I've found several people arguing one way or the other, but it was at the state school. They were rebuilding the boilers, and they put this K4 in there to provide steam to the school while they were rebuilding the boilers. And I just threw that in there as this show was made for the general public, and I just thought I'd show them how we move snow in the old days. I don't have any idea where that is. Someplace. But could have used that this morning. And again, for the benefit of the general public who thinks all steam locomotives are black, I don't see any black there. So each of the railroads had their own way of getting down to Cape May, and this one was to get to Senile City, or as Tom Moran calls it, Senile City. Atlantic City Railroad's just south of Cedar Swamp Creek. If you go over the bridge where everybody crabs and fishes, where it says no crabbing or fishing, there's a foundation just south of the bridge, and that's where the tower was. And the tower was the same size and shape as Tuckahoe Tower. It was a 28 lever standard machine, and that's where the Sea Isle branch came off. In fact, you can still see the Sea Isle branch right of way in the woods there to the left of Route 50. There's Sea Isle Junction on the, I don't know what railroad it is. Oh, pick one. I like all the little sheds around. There's, yeah, that is Sea Isle Junction on the West Jersey. Because the next one coming up is Sea Isle Junction on the Reading line. And that, go ahead, Dave. That hand-drawn map is from the Eddie Fell collection. And engineers and firemen too, I guess. But when you became an engineer, you had to be familiar with your territory. And quite often they would draw a little drawing so they could remember where the signals were and the switches were, and who's in charge of this switch and that switch and whatnot. So that was a little drawing Eddie Fell drew, and it looks like it was a really happening place. It's a good sized tower, little station building, good sized water tank. They even have a signal bridge over both tracks. I put that in there for a reason, but I can't remember the reason. Go ahead, Dave.
I believe the lady that created this is from May's Landing.
Yeah, May's Landing. She wrote a book. I guess I was just giving her a plug. It's nice artwork. Anyway, there's another little, Sea Isle Junction. And I was talking to Al Buchanan one time. Al was a management guy on the Pensy. And I mentioned something about a train wreck, and he says, they're never called train wrecks. He says they're always a derailment, no matter how bad they are. It's a derailment. I guess in legalese, it didn't sound as bad as a wreck. So it's always a derailment. And those were wooden cars. And again, half the town showed up to look at what was happening. And the other half were railroad section men. There's another evaluation picture. But even that little dinky station had his baggage cart. Now, if you know where Route 83 is, this is where the West Jersey went under Route 83. That's Route 83 up top. Town's called Claremont, population 0, more or less. More when you get there, less when you leave. But you can still see the overpass. I couldn't find a whole lot in Senile City, but I did find this in it. It's, I love me a gas electric. There's another engineer and his steed. These guys were really proud of their work and proud of their equipment. There's another one I just threw in for the color. That's in Atlantic City, which has absolutely nothing to do with this program. But it's another black steam engine. Mr. and Mrs. Whittlecamp, the West Jersey had their own, it was almost like a boarding house. It was a place for their employees to spend a weekend or a couple of days or a week or whatever they could get. And this was in the files of the West Jersey chapter. So I guess they were lucky. Of course, when I go to Corson's Inlet, I don't dress in a vest and a sweater and all that. So let's assume they weren't there for the swimming. It's a nice bridge to look at, but I wouldn't want to have to maintain it. And that was kind of its undoing in the end. Well, those A-frame bridges, they were everywhere, and they worked. And that's what was left of it in 1961. And I was down there after the 62 storm, and I can tell you there wasn't a damn thing left after 62. And I put that in there because I like it. I really wish it was better lit. But It just reminds me of something Tyco would make. Just a little A-class engine and a little caboose and a pile driver. Of course, it's Inlet Station. That's the West Jersey station. And they used to have some overhead wire down there between Strathmere and Townsend's Inlet. Then you get all dressed up in your white outfit and you go walk in the dirt. Now that's the West Jersey's Cape May Courthouse station. Obviously, the sign didn't come out too good, so the photographer fixed it in his darkroom. But this is a block or two west of the present, where the present railroad is, and you can kind of figure it out by tracing the large power lines. And that's one thing for people that like to trace all railroad lines. If you find the big power lines, they quite often took over the railroad right away. Notice the outhouse. And that's the West Jersey crossing the Atlantic City at Burley. And it was, that's all it was a crossing, or no switches or anything else involved. And it was nice, they put the outhouse across the tracks. Now the line where the line perpendicular to the locomotive to the right is going out to, I guess, Wildwood. I'm not a shore person. I grew up on the Chesapeake Bay, so I don't know much about the shore. Anglesey Junction. At 2339, I bought cars that cost more than that. I'm sure we all have. But they expected a lot of summertime customers because the benches are all out in the open air. And the West Jersey's Wildwood Junction Station. And beautiful downtown Wildwood on the West Jersey. And what a crowd. Five Mile Beach Electric Railway, that's the little trolley line down there. 4 rides for 25 cents. I thought that was pretty neat. It's one of the few color shots I've found that old. And I don't know when or where, because if it wasn't on the back of the picture, I didn't know where it was or when it was. Rio Grande passenger station. The interesting thing I think about this photo is today there's a power line that runs along this right of way. And if you look in the back, right, you'll see a couple of box cars. They're sitting on the Atlantic City Railroad, which is the one we have there today, that Cape May Seashore Lines runs on. So it's a little bit grown up today. But in those days, they kept everything cut and pulled and whatnot. So this was one of their favorite types of building. It did everything it needed to do. And note the freight station, you'll see a couple more just like that. But I mean, it's a nice station for $1,200. Now this is going down to Bennett on the West Jersey. And then when you're in Bennett, you're nowhere. It's just down the road from that other station, a couple of miles. But note, he's got the big freight station, because this whole area, today they grow houses, but in those days they grew corn and all sorts of other vegetables. And that's the end of the line. Cape May for West Jersey. Lasted until 1932. And of course, the merger took place between the two lines in 33. But it's a grand and glorious station for Cape May. It fits into the architecture. It's too bad they had to tear it down, but I guess the termites would have taken it anyway. That's it from another angle. But you can see the road's paved with dirt. And we're back in Tuckahoe. The reason I started there is because the county line is the Tuckahoe River. So we'll start at the Tuckahoe River. There's a train back in the back, all the way in the back there, crossing the river. Tuckahoe Tower is still there. The station is still there. Unfortunately, the tool house kind of met a dump truck backed into it, and they had to tear the rest of that down. The little garden is still there. And you can see, can you see my pointer, Dave? You can see the scale house off to the right. They had those hall banjo signals down there. And there's one of the water tanks. There's another one on the other line here. That's the Cape May branch. This is the Ocean City branch, closest to us on the right. In fact, the photo is taken from the tank on the Ocean City branch, not the tank that's there today. That was put in later, after the merger. And the note on the back of the print said this was a P7 SA and only 4 were ever built. Now, I don't know from steam engines, but I can see a Reading steam engine coming from a mile away. There's the tank that's there today. And Mill Road is right about where the last car is. You can see the tower up there. And the car belonged to the photographer. There was a, okay, keep going. That was, then as now, politicians got a free ride. So this city councilman in Camden, he had a free ride. Signed by Theodore Voorhees, first vice president. It's a coal train coming in. You'll never see that again. But when I first started working down there, we saw them a couple of times a week. Viewing the tower. I don't know if it's a Will Coxey shot. I got a package one time before he died from Jim Leslie, and he said, I don't know, I don't remember taking these, and he had a couple of pictures similar, so he could have gotten some Will Coxey pictures, or he could have taken them himself. But it's a nice shot of inside the tower. The levers are all still there, and the desk, that built-in desk, is still there. And we try and take care of it. That's one I stole from eBay. And the lady down at Tuckahoe said, oh, that's my father. I said, well, send me your email. I'll send you a copy of the picture. And I never heard from her again. So I guess she thought better of it. Notice the yellow flags, which are the train order flags, up against the wall. And he's got all his different color lanterns down there on the desk. And that's some celebration we had. I don't know. I guess that was a URHS event. We had the two working RDCs. That's a Will Coxey shot from the good old days, 1965 anyway. And that's your Cape May freight coming up on the right, and an Ocean City train on the left. And that's a neat shot. I think that's a Bob Long shot. Fancy engine on the Ocean City line, or Reading engine on the Cape May line. Track inspector, he has to come up every week, except when we're running passenger trains, then he has to come up twice a week. And we got to pay him for the second trip. That's the Senile City line. By this time, and I'm saying this time, I think this was late 20s. It had gone down to this. He'll run down the road 5 miles and then take the Senile City branch. There wasn't a whole lot of traffic then because the roads were getting better. And that's supposedly the last steam engine through Tuckahoe, 1968. That was a fan trip. Jim Leslie had a lot to do with putting it together. And I was in the military, so I couldn't be here to see it or ride it. A couple more Wilcoxy shots. That's a train coming out from Wildwood and Cape May. And notice the car back by the maintenance building there. They're going to come up, back down, couple up to that car, do a brake test, and whistle off. Something they did every day for many years. You can see the scale track is cut dead there. Looks like there may even be a speeder on the scale track down there, all the way back in the left. The only thing that's left is that white building, which is today a banquet hall, and the tower. You can still see the top of the tower. And one or two poles. This is from the bridge, the Route 49 bridge. And notice the nice, neat vineyard over there on the right, and just nice little grass on the left. Well, today on the left, it's a forest, and on the right, it's also forest. Now, I like this one because it tells a story if you look at it close. He's coming across the bridge. You got a combine, two coaches, a combine, and two coaches. So they're going to pull that train up to where the second coach and the second combine are coupled. And they'll put those marker lamps you see on the ground, they'll put them on the end of that coach, the second coach. And that train will take off to wherever it's going. And then there's another locomotive up there, which will back down and couple up to the rest of the train that's there, which already has its markers on it. And they'll go on off. And that, again, it's something that they did every day. Incidentally, that house is still there. The highway at one time went through there. That house would have been built on the highway. This is taken from the highway overpass today, Route 49 overpass, not from the tower. Another Wilcoxy shot. And you can tell things are getting a little more decrepit. There's more weeds. It just looks kind of run down. Though we're still going south, and there's downtown Petersburg. Notice the boxcar, the old wooden boxcar they're using for a freight station, and you'll see this in several photos. They didn't waste any money. They'd squeeze every penny out of whatever they had. So I'm trying to determine if that thing at the left end of the boxcar is a phone booth or what. Maybe that's where like midget Superman changes. I don't know. That's when the bridge was wooden, and today it's steel. They rebuilt it some years ago. I'll never forget the 62 storm I came across on the road, and this thing was so heaped up with crap. They had the crane down there, the clamshell bucket, and they were just throwing it off into the stream, but it just was piled probably 10 feet high with swamp grass and stuff. That's another view of it. You can see Route 50 on the right. And I say if you scratch around today, you can still find that foundation for that tower, though very little else. And it's outlined in cedar trees because it's the only thing that will grow around there. There's your proud 5-man crew, 2-car train. Now we're getting from Cape May Courthouse, the Stone Harbor branch came off, and there's a couple of pieces of rail still in the dirt today. Again, a maintenance nightmare on the right. Going into Ocean City, and that station, somebody told me it might have come from Bridgeton. I'm not certain on that, but they were great for reusing and recycling. And that must have been a long train because for 2 locomotives to pull it, unless they were equalizing motive power. Here we are at the Gardens, or if you're in Massachusetts, the Gardens. Which is long gone. Of course, the space that train takes up, you could build one of them quadruplexes. I like that. I like the truck. Short finish line. This would have been a great ride on a summer evening, I'm sure, on a hot summer night. This is Ocean City would be across the bridge. You know, I'm pointing, you're not seeing. Ocean City would be what we're looking at. And then behind us is going to be the route to Atlantic City, up through Linwood and all that. There were a lot of crossings up there. I'm glad they printed that news on that baby parade, because if there's one place I don't want to be, it's around a couple of hundred crying babies. Bad enough going to a chapter meeting, you know. That's a good one. Yeah, that's when men were men, and you know, it's it's got to be a tough job. He's got a belt on his waist, but still, it's a tough job. The PRSL had several of these cars made up with a false bottom, so they could shovel load these locomotives. And, I wouldn't want to do it. Here we are back in the Atlantic City Railroad, Corson's Inlet Station. That's another one of those evaluation pictures. And, you know, it takes 4 guys to make an evaluation, plus the photographers back in the woods somewhere. These are probably the guys that tell him how to do his job.
Small speeder too.
Well, that's how the photographer traveled. So one of those guys is probably the speeder operator. Also, another one of those wooden freight houses there, old box cars. And the railroad itself ran excursions. And this is one. There's a lot of cars on there. I think it's a 12-car train. Coming into Strathmere. And notice the guy climbing up there. I don't know if he's the fireman or the head end brakeman or what, but not a job I would put in for. I remember going up a couple of times. We had snowstorms and the horns froze up. Somebody had to volunteer to go up on the roof of the engine and try and clear the horn. Not a pleasant job. Another little bit, I don't know where this is. I think it's a Jersey Central engine, but just another derailment. And that's the Woodbine Junction Tower. And the thing is, the railroad, the Atlantic City Railroad, was from Camden to this tower, Woodbine Junction, was 2 tracks all the way through Winslow, all the way through. It was 2 tracks. And those 2 tracks in later years were signaled in both directions. And sadly, that's what happened to it. They decided they didn't really need a tower there, so they cut the top off. You can still see where the steps were. They didn't even paint over it. Crossing the bridge over 510. Those coal hoppers are going down to the magnesite plant because their plant was fired by coal. There's a shot looking from the west. And the next station down on the Atlantic City line was Dennisville. And if you go over to Smithville Village over on Route 9, that station is still there and it's well preserved. Sadly, the handcar house is gone. They're building some kind of structures over here. They're building almost up to the railroad. Just a little ethereal picture. Locomotive floating in the swamp. You can see the bridge to the right. We get another 18 inches of water, it'll be over the rails. South Dennis. And these towns today, you wouldn't even blink your eye as you spread through them, but in those days, that was one of the ways to get around because the roads really were no good. See the guy's jalopy there. This road is no longer there. The crossing's there, but it's so buried in the brush, you can't find. I could take you to it, but it's tough to find. They had some kind of nasty accident there, so they closed the crossing forever. And the Route 83 bridge is to the left, a couple of 100 feet. Goshen Station, another neat little station just off of Goshen Road, and they had the little freight station. Those platforms were big because they'd often put milk cans up there, ship it into the city. Again, this is a big agricultural area. That's where they crossed. At one time, there was a bridge, and you can see in the top left picture where the bridge abutment on the right, on the left, it's kind of eroded. As time goes by, there's nothing left. You look today, there's nothing left. In fact, it's a paved walking trail today, bicycle walking trail. And again, if you want to follow the electric lines. Like the other station at Cape May Courthouse, for whatever reason, the photographer touched that sign up too. That's a postcard. And that's Manny Moe and Jack standing out on a platform, I guess. I just threw that in there. That's that Holman truck experiment at courthouse. And it just didn't work too good. Besides being ugly. There was the 1959 shot of the courthouse station, and the line to Stone Harbor goes off on the right. You can't see in this picture, but I don't know why. Well, you see that what replaced it is a bus. That bus goes to from Stone Harbor. But the rails are still back going up into those woods. In fact, if you kept going on that road, it would become Stone Harbor Boulevard. This is a neat picture. You've seen it before in the books and whatnot. This was a Bud Company publicity shot. That's all I know about it. That's kind of maybe the whole fleet of RDCs that the PRSL owns. I don't know. Guy's got clean gloves on. I don't know what he's standing on. Stone Harbor Traction Railroad number 101. They had a little Y that they turned it on. You can see the switch back in the back there. I don't think that lasted very long. They had problems. Plus, Stone Harbor, you're only there for 3-4 months a year. The rest of the time it's winter. Now, today, I was talking to my backyard neighbor today. He was just down over the weekend. Well, it doesn't matter today. They got heat and light all year long. But in those days, I remember my great-grandmother's house in Wildwood. She didn't have a heating plant. And the stove in the kitchen, you had to light with a match. Some of these kids today, they'd be horrified. There's a steam dummy pulling some open air trolley cars. That didn't last long either. All these things, it was great when it started, but people just kind of found other ways to do it. But you see, a steam, excuse me, if you don't know, a steam dummy was built like a passenger car or trolley car so that the steam locomotive part of it wouldn't scare the horses. And there were a lot of horses in those days. It was coming out to the Scotch Bonnet Trestle between the Cape May Courthouse and Stone Harbor. Again, another maintenance monster. That would be Stone Harbor Boulevard today. And that was the push me, pull you. And they didn't have any turning facilities out at the Stone Harbor end, so they just run around and pull it one way and push it the other way. I don't know if you all know where Scotch Bonnet is, but I'd never heard of it before. And I worked all over New Jersey. When I worked for the telephone company, I had to look it up. And ain't much to it. Oh, back to Wildwood Junction. Sadly, that station recently got finished off. Nobody took care of it. And it was hard to get to. You couldn't even drive to it in the end. And it was a shame because it was a very interesting station. Of course, this section down to the right, you can see the tracks going in there. That's where they could put their speeder. So the right end was for the track maintenance people. And then the left end was for the agent operator, I should say. And it was a compact little station. They only had a couple of switches that they control. And that's the Cape May branch in front of us. The Wildwood branch switches off behind. There's a Y out there and a couple of customers. Go ahead, Dave. There's that steam engine, steam train again. you can see the track from the ties from the siding track they tore up. And you can see that little concrete building down there. That's still there. Of course, that was a battery, what they call a battery cellar. Had batteries for the signals in there. And it was all cast reinforced concrete. So they're tough for the vandals to destroy. I mean, they destroy the door, but they can't do much else about it. Yeah, this was the actual last steam locomotive to run by Wildwood Junction, because they shipped the thing down here on a flatbed, and we took it off the truck at Cape May Courthouse, just adjacent to their firehouse. And they choo-chooed on down to Rio Grande. That was a Brooklyn Eastern District terminal steam locomotive. They had a lot of them. That's how you got around those tight turns in Brooklyn. Northbound at Wildwood Junction, another Reading engine. So that train is coming up from Cape May, and that's a lot of cars. Now that train is later, sometime in the 60s, and I can't tell if it's one or two RDCs, but isn't much. That's coming from Wildwood. And you can see the oil dealer back. I don't think today they'd let loaded oil tanks sit on the track that's adjacent to passenger trains. That's just a neat picture Bob Long took. Everybody knew Bob, so he probably told those guys, hey, stand this way. For $7,300, you too can have this station. That's a very old picture. Look at the open vestibule on the coach. That beats shoveling. I keep finding new pictures, but I hesitate to put them in the show because I can't stand here for 2 or more hours, you know. I did this show in Tuckahoe, and I stood there for an hour and a half, and at the end of the program, my legs wouldn't move. That's a very old picture. Wouldn't want to be the fireman on a Camelback, or the engineer for that matter. We've got a K4, we've got a P70, and we got the lounge car. I forget what that is. It's not a P70 though. See, it's air conditioned. It was before the air conditioned, most of the P70s. Wildwood and Delaware Bay short line. That's a substantial looking locomotive there, little Plymouth. Again, everybody's standing around that. You had to stand still for that photography. Number 1, PRSL. I mean, it's hard to believe today. Like a 12-car train route was the regular train into Wildwood, Cape May. One of the last freight trains, and you can see they didn't have much freight business. Probably beer in that car. Wildwood crest. Today you go down there, it's a real wide drive, real wide road. Yeah, I don't think they need the water pipe, but there's 1957, there still might be 1 or 2 things that drink water down there. And that's the Rio Grande. And they tell me the technical term is Rio Grande. Depends on what kind of English you speak. But that's the station that's down at Cold Spring Village. I got a key here in my pocket for it. We don't use it anymore. And this is the attitude the railroad had up until 1980 or so. To say there's snow down there, we better put an engine on those cars. So they put an engine on those RDCs to bust the snowbanks, and you can see how high up the snow is on that engine. So I guess they needed it. But today, I noticed the last time it snowed, the Atlantic City line just canceled everything. That's a Sperry car at Bennett. The only thing I know Bennett was famous for was in the 20s or 30s, there was a siding there, and the track maintenance guys left the switch open, and a high-speed train ran through the switch, and that was a disaster. And that's one that we ran down at Cold Spring Village. And that tower, incidentally, is the restored version of what was at Woodbine. And the guy told me, and I don't know how accurate it is, but the guy who used to work in towers for the Reading said, you can tell a Reading tower because the steps are on the outside, and a Pensy tower, the steps are on the inside. Well, I don't know how accurate that is, but if you start looking around, it's pretty true. And that engine and its partner are down in Mississippi somewhere rusting away. That's a Bob Farrell shot. Hey, you're welcome, Brad. Crossing the canal bridge. Yeah, well, I used to be the maintainer for that bridge too, and it would take us a good half a day to lubricate it. There's so many moving parts underneath. Uh, and that's all I can comment on that. That was the Atlantic City station. And that station would have set what is today the Acme parking lot. Just a different angle. The interesting thing on that picture is the poles on the left side of the road are telephone poles, and the poles on the right are electric poles. So Cape May was wired for everything. And they were probably party lines too. And that was a bunch of squids. Sorry, you Navy guys. They got the little Plymouth locomotive out there, and they take these Navy guys around on the weekends. Or they may be Coast Guard guys. Hell, I don't know. I was in the Army, so guy with a white hat looks the same to me. And there's that house today that we saw in the previous picture. If you want to back that up again, Dave, just for kicks. You do that. The guy that thought this out was a genius. You dig sand out of the water, and next time the tide changes, it fills in the hole. And then next day you go to work and you dig sand out of the water in the same place. And it pretty much doesn't cost you anything. Hey, we got to hurry up. I'm on my second bottle. That's another favorite Bob Long shot.
It's the magnesite plant.
Yeah, they're switching coal into the boiler area. One of their early locomotives. These trains, they would have to come almost all the way into the Cape May station, and then there's a switch back. Yeah, I'm pointing again. There's a switch back in the back somewhere. They would throw the switch and then shove this thing the mile and a half or whatever out to the point. Using hand signals, by the way. They didn't have radios in those days. And that's the original station location, which was, as I said earlier, in the Acme parking lot. You can see where it says markets for Acme Markets. And that's actually Washington Street down there. If you know the Washington Mall, that's where that would be, down all the way to the back of that. This was for the freight train that started in Cape May. They would work their way up and set the cars out in the little yard at Tuckahoe, and then they worked their way back. And I think this is toward the end, and certain days they went down to Ocean City. That was something we had, some anniversary or something. That's me waving at you. A little modern day switching at Tuckahoe. Of course, they were using a couple of GP38s, and they are really nice locomotives. Another little commercial for Operation Lifesaver. I think that's it. Thank you
All
for
right.
watching.